have to do it for you, okay? First speaker today is going to be Mark Jackson. That's Jackson, and he's a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Second speaker will be Kevin Taylor, Taylor. He's our Unified Incident Commander, Division Chief for Montecito Fire District. Third will be Tom Ferrum, Fayram. He's the Deputy Director of the Public Works Flood Control for Santa Barbara County. And followed Tom will be Cindy Ponce. She's captain with the California Highway Patrol, Pontes. And our last speaker today will be Bill Brown. He's the sheriff for the Santa Barbara County. Okay. So if we can, we're going to have those speakers. If we could hold all questions till the very end, and if everyone could please silence their cell phones, we'll start. At first, I'd like to acknowledge State Assembly Member Monique Limon, who's in the audience today. Thank you. My name is Captain Dave Zanaboni. I'm the Public Information Officer for Santa Barbara County Fire Department, and welcome today to our latest update for this March storm event. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mark Jackson, meteorologist for the National Weather Service.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everybody, and good afternoon. So if you rewind to about a week ago, we were expecting a multi-day rain event to hit the area, fueled by a very long and narrow but powerful band of water that we call an atmospheric river. And we knew that this was going to last several days. We knew that we would get significant rainfall out of this event. We had an idea that we could potentially see some rainfall intensities that could potentially produce some debris flows in the recent burn areas. So we did get the rain. There was quite a bit of rain in some of the areas within Santa Barbara County itself. Down on the coast, we saw anywhere from between 2 to 5 inches of rain. As you get higher up into the foothills and the mountains, we had a pretty good steady dose of about 4 to 6 inches of rain. As you go along the central coast, the winter was up into the central coast where some areas received between 8 and 10 inches of rain. For the most part, though, luckily, this has been a fairly beneficial rain. We've only had a few scatterings of reports of some of the intense rainfall that could cause debris flows. And luckily, the system has really handled that rain intensity very well. And when you think back to the January event, there's only been just a few cases where we have had some rainfall intensities within the burn areas of Thomas or even over to the Sherpa and to the Whittier burn area, where we've had intensities that have exceeded the USGS threshold for debris flows. And again, we've had very little, if any, impacts from these intensities. So for the most part, the area has been spared, and very, very fortunately. So now that the storm is actually on its last gasp, it's raining outside. I brought my umbrella, of course. You can tell the non-fireman who brings the umbrella. And we have an area, as we're seeing right now on radar, to our west that is producing some showers, occasionally some brief moderate rainfall. That could continue through this evening across this area. And we could have some rainfall rates that might reach sort of the lower end of what's considered a threshold for debris flows. But we're not expecting any of those rainfall rates to produce anything more than some minor debris flows that are not considered to be significant, especially within the populated areas. And with all the work that's been done to clear out the debris basins and the channels, and just as what we've seen with this event, in that it's handled this rain very well through the channels and through the debris basins, we expect that any showers that may occur tonight will be handled fairly well by the infrastructure that's in place. So finally, people should still stay alert through the evening until we're really fully in the clear, which should be sometime overnight tonight, and then things should dry out tomorrow. And just to finish off, we're still in a drought, so this was a good rain, and we could use more of the good rain, but considering everything that this area has been through and this community has been through, what's expected over the next several weeks with warmer and drier conditions would actually be a pretty good relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to introduce Kevin Taylor. He's the Unified Incident Commander for the incident.
Good afternoon. The Santa Barbara County Front Country Fire Departments, the Sheriff's Office, Santa Barbara Police Department, the Emergency Operations Centers of the City of Santa Barbara, City of Carpinteria, and County of Santa Barbara, with the support of fire departments from throughout California, the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, the California National Guard, all deployed resources to our community in advance of this forecast storm. We activated our local incident management team and strategically pre-deployed over 400 fire department, Sheriff's Office search and rescue responders, and high water vehicles in advance of what was forecast to be the most significant storm this winter. As you heard, the storm was fed by an atmospheric river and was expected to produce rainfall rates that had the potential to cause debris flows similar to the event we experienced on January 9th. We positioned our emergency responders in those areas of the community that the experts tell us are most at risk for damaging debris flows, but fortunately none occurred. I wanted to assure the community that as long as we are at risk for debris flows, we will continue to do this. Our number one job is to protect our communities and to keep you safe. And we are here for you, and we consider it our mission to protect you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to introduce Tom Ferrum. He's the Deputy Director of Santa Barbara County Public Works and Flood Control.
Thank you. As Mark mentioned, our front country hills receive between 4 and 6 inches of rainfall. That amount of rainfall certainly has the potential to generate significant runoff, and in fact it did. However, I'm very glad to report that our debris basins, which we worked so hard with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA and the state OES, all of those basins were completely cleaned out, and they performed absolutely perfectly through this storm. One of the basins in particular, Cold Springs, received the most amount of material. Approximately a third capacity was taken up by this storm, mostly small rocks. Our staff, working with contractors, entered that basin earlier today and are working on that as we speak right now. All the basins will be reviewed throughout the rest of the week and will be addressed as needed. But right now, we have plenty of capacity in all of these basins, and we're very happy with how they performed. Regarding the stream channels downstream through the community of Montecito and Carpinteria, we worked quite hard to clear these channels out to provide capacity for the runoff that we knew eventually would come. All of these channels performed perfectly as well. We're able to handle all the runoff that came down from the mountains, and especially without the debris load that would have come from the mountains. So we're extremely happy with all that. And as mentioned by Chief Taylor, we'll be here through this whole winter and beyond to make sure that those facilities are in place and working. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to introduce Cindy Ponce, Captain, California Highway Patrol.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. The CHP monitored the storm very closely and determined there was no threat to public safety on the 101, and we were able to keep it open the entire duration of this storm. We're very thankful that Caltrans crews were working around the clock to put out advisory signs and to clear any rocks and mud that made their way onto the roadway. Please slow down in this wet weather. The roadway can be very slick and have standing water on it. Also, please turn on your headlights when your windshield wipers are on. And we want everyone to arrive safely at their destinations. We want to thank the community for their continued cooperation and support during this storm. This community is absolutely amazing and extremely resilient, and we will continue to get through these storms together. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. I'd like to introduce Sheriff Bill Brown, Santa Barbara County.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me address the most important point that I know everyone is interested in, and that is that the mandatory evacuation order in effect in the southern part of Santa Barbara County will be lifted effective at 5 p.m. today. This coincides with the expiration of the National Weather Service's flash flood watch. That this storm did not reach the threshold predicted to cause substantial debris flows and possibly cause loss of life and property in areas below the burn areas is the best news that we can deliver today. We dodged a bullet when this storm did not reach its full potential and actually ended up veering off to the north and to the south of us. Based on the information that our partners at the National Weather Service and the U.S. Geological Survey predicted, as well as the experience of some of the most knowledgeable public safety and emergency managers available, we made the right decision to evacuate those who were believed to be in harm's way. We know that the science of predicting the weather is inexact. You've heard from the meteorologists, and these folks from the National Weather Service are the world's best. You've heard them describe what they fully expected to see. And while this storm did result in impressive rainfalls and in some isolated areas that had high intensity levels of rainfall, the burn areas did not receive rainfall rates that could trigger dangerous and potentially deadly debris flows. However, everyone who lives below the burn scar areas needs to be and needs to stay informed and to understand that these areas, particularly those that are below the Thomas Fire burn area, have still not experienced a major test of the damaged watershed since January the 9th. That means that we will almost certainly have future evacuation orders in the coming few years. And as we are nearing the end of the winter storm time frame, our hope is that this will be the last evacuation of the season. But we are prepared, and everyone in the community should be prepared for another potential evacuation if it's necessary. We need the people of Santa Barbara County to continue to take the threat of future debris flows very seriously. We are not out of the woods yet, and we won't be for some time to come. We know that evacuations are incredibly inconvenient and stressful. We know that they are a burden financially for residents and businesses alike. And we know that they are disruptive to our schools. And the list goes on, but they are very necessary. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating. We absolutely agonize about a decision to order evacuations. Our first and our top priority is always to keep each and every member of this community safe. And the final decision to evacuate is always based on that priority. I want to take a moment and speak directly to our community. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of us up here for your overwhelming compliance with this evacuation order. We thank you for your patience and for your understanding. You were vigilant and responsible, and everyone here appreciates your cooperation. Thank you for supporting us as we protect your safety. Unless you hear otherwise, all schools are anticipated to be open tomorrow as normal. And once again, all mandatory and recommended evacuation warnings and orders will be lifted effective at 5 p.m. today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. So we'll take a few minutes, 5 or so minutes, for any questions that anybody may have. Yes, John.
Someone from the Weather Service possibly, or maybe flood control, tell us where the highest amount of rain was. Some of these areas that had 5 or 8 or 10 inches of rain. Some locator of some sort.
Jack, you got that? Tom's calculating it right now. Oh.
Yeah. Of course, Rocky Butte was the winner. They had the 10-inch, 10 point something up in Rocky Butte. Some other areas from like Morro Bay up to Rocky Butte had in that 7 to 8 or 9 inch range. The sites within Santa Barbara County, there was the one site right above Santa Barbara. The KYTD Tower site actually had a rainfall rate of 0.28 inches in 10 minutes. And, that is actually above the threshold for debris flow. Fortunately, it was that one burst. It was early this morning where we had some pretty intense cells quickly, and so that was a good thing. Some of the other sites across the Thomas Burn area, and especially back on the backside of the Thomas Burn area, did exceed some other rates on the backcountry. But for the most part, it's fairly spread fairly evenly across the ridge tops in terms of rainfall amounts of that 4 to 5 inches across. And then even down on the south coast, we had some pretty healthy amounts in which everything kind of behaved fairly well down on the south coast. Right. Over the outlook actually through the remainder of March and looking out into the first couple of weeks of April at least, our NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, which provides those seasonal outlooks, is expecting above normal temperatures for the area and below normal precipitation. So maybe a little bit of a chance to dry out from what we've had over the recent time. Well, we had the moisture, the atmospheric river that we saw and that was picked up and that was forecast did happen. I mean, we certainly had the rainfall amounts. It's very possible, though, that sort of the dynamics that really caused that intense lifting with these storms wasn't quite there. What we experienced in January was a very rare event. It was a 1 in a 100-year event. I mean, it was that kind of rainfall rate. We still were expecting the potential to see not those kind of rates with this storm, but at least rates that could cause concern and potential debris flows. And as we saw this storm over the last couple of days and how things evolved, the cells that did form never quite had the punch that we thought it might have. We thought today, especially this morning, might be the most intense period, and that was the period of concern. And we started out that way this morning. It didn't quite finish that way, but we had some pockets, and a lot of this is just a matter of luck. Where we get some of these areas of heavy rain, and a lot of times it's just lucky that it doesn't occur over a recent burn area. So sometimes you have to hope for that.
Well, it seemed like last night it sort of shifted farther to the north. Was that unexpected?
No, the models have had sort of a rough time with this a little bit, and we did notice that trend that some of the heavier rainfall was further to the north, and even as we're seeing right now, some of with this band of precipitation that is coming through San Luis Obispo down to western Santa Barbara County, it may kind of skirt the Sherpa and the Whittier Burn area. Most of that is also to the north, and that could also be because the main low that's associated with this system is a little further north as it moves across and as it makes landfall north of us instead of kind of directly over us. But again, just didn't have quite the punch and the dynamics to really get that air to rise up quickly. And again, not like what we saw back in January.
At what point did you just kind of breathe a sigh of relief and maybe Sheriff, you can talk about that as well, when you realized, okay, we're going to turn a corner here and we're not going to see devastation?
Well, it was the decision that went into lifting was a group decision, and with the input of what we were expecting for the remainder of today and into this evening, which is why I mentioned earlier that there is still that potential for some brief, moderate, and heavy showers through this evening. But again, based on what we've seen and how the infrastructure has handled this rain so far and the work that's been done by the county and the state and federal officials to clean out the basin and the channels, that if we do see that kind of rainfall, that the infrastructure should be able to handle that and keep it all channeled in and controlled and down the channel and not impact any populated areas. But again, it's important to stay alert. It's important to keep an eye on what's going on over the next few hours. It's not quite over until the whole thing swings through, which is what we expect will happen around the middle of tonight.
The question was, how did the public react to this evacuation order compared to the prior ones that we had? I assume you mean with the last two storms that we've had. And the compliance rate that we were told by those who we contacted was significantly higher. We contacted people throughout that burn area, and remember that it's not. We can't say with exact certainty how many people evacuated or not, because many of the homes that we went to were unoccupied, or there was no response at the door. So we assume that many of those people would have evacuated. Some of those people might have been at work. Some of them might have been out of the country, and on vacation. But of those that we did contact, we had verbally from assurances from them that about 75% of them were going to be leaving, and only about 25% that would stay. And that compares to rates that were significantly less than that, about 50-50 in the last two storms. But the reality is the last two storms were borderline storms compared to this. This was obviously much longer duration, was predicted to be a much stronger storm. That wasn't a secret. People understood that. And it was evident that that message did get out to people, and we did have a high rate of compliance. Well, I think, we can only do so much. I mean, we realistically can only warn people so much. The decision ultimately comes down to personal responsibility, and people who choose to stay, in essence, at their own peril. And remember, we focused our door-to-door evacuation notices only in the extreme risk areas. Because this was such a large area, we didn't have the resources to be able to go door-to-door at every door. It was only in those areas of extreme risk, typically along the water courses. And as a result of what happened on January the 9th, and as a result of the messaging, the news, the weather information, I think most people got the message, and obviously the vast majority of people decided to leave the area.
Okay, maybe one or two if we have anything else, or we can. Okay.
We get to this point now that although it has stopped raining, how concerned are you that these hillsides are still unstable, and as they dry out, they could potentially tumble?
Let's let Rob Lewin, Director of OEM, speak with that.
Robert Lewin, the Director of the Office of Emergency Management. So the question was, how vulnerable are the mountains now? So this year, the mountains are very vulnerable. It's the first year after a burn. The burn intensities on those mountains in the Thomas Fire took everything away to hold back any kind of debris, as we know from the debris flow of January 9th. The potential for a similar event is still there this year. The good news is, with the series of storms that we've just had, the vegetation now has a chance to grow. As much of that as can grow, we'll start to stabilize it. Currently, under the USGS standards, we use 0.5 inches of rain per hour for the measurement that could cause a debris flow. Next year, if we get enough regrowth, we may be able to move that threshold up to 0.8 inches per hour. That obviously would decrease the number of times that people would have to evacuate in the future. So what we need to do now is see what kind of regeneration we get on the hills this spring and this summer, and then hope for a significant amount that will start to stabilize these hills. But That said, it takes about 3 to 5 years for a burn area to be completely stabilized.
Is there any way to help that process by mulching, like we did after the decision order?
So the question is, does mulching or other stabilization, can it occur mitigation, different kinds of mitigation? The problem that we have throughout the Los Padres National Forest, including on the Sherpa-Whittier Ray Fire and the Thomas Fire, is that the topography is extremely steep. And these are very large burn areas. So the effectiveness of hydromulching, which is a material that's almost like a paper mache material that is applied, is very limited to the lower elevation areas, and the effect of the erosion above that would essentially diminish its ability to hold back the mountain. So there is a report that the Forest Service did called the Bear Report, and it's available on our website as well as theirs, which talks about the effects of mitigation if people are interested in more about that.
Mr. Levin, when it comes to this fraud flyer that you're asking people to avoid, have there been any actual problems with that suspect who tried to enter the property?
I'm going to pass that off to the sheriff if I could.
Fraud, yeah. I'm sorry, and can you repeat the exact question?
You talked about a fraud flyer earlier that someone is pretending to be from the OEM and trying to gain access to people's homes.
Correct. The question was asking about a flyer that went out from the Office of Emergency Management about a potential criminal activity that was occurring or is occurring that we need the public to be aware of, and that is that someone developed and put together this fraudulent flyer that indicates that there would be, quote, land technicians, unquote, that would be attempting to gain access to homes. And this is not an official document. This is something that's been cut and pasted together. And the attempt to use this presumably to gain access to someone's property for nefarious purposes, or to use it to fraudulently tell someone that they needed some kind of work done at their home or on their land. Everyone needs to be aware of that. This flyer is not an official document. It's a fraudulent document. The call came in that actually occurred in the city of Santa Barbara, and the Santa Barbara Police Department searched the area for the suspect that was presenting this document. It was not able to locate him. So we want everybody to be aware that this was the case. The suspect in this case, he wore an ID, presumably a fake ID, on a lanyard, and he claimed to be a representative of the county's Office of Emergency Management. And he attempted to gain access to the property. And again, we want to assure the public that no representatives from the Office of Emergency Management are in the field, and they would not be attempting to gain access to anyone's home or property. This was in Santa Barbara that it occurred.
Okay, that concludes today's news conference, and all of our agency representatives will be standing around for a little bit if we have any more questions. Thank you for coming today.